Aha Moments is brought to you by Das Fort Media.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Aha Moments with Alena. And today I am so pleased to have Kevin Mullett as our guest. And let me tell you a little bit about him. He is Director of Visibility and Social Media at Cirrus ABS, which is an award-winning marketing technology solutions firm. And Market Snare is a product that he has to help brands capture local opportunity like SEO for dealer networks. And the things that I like the best is that he's an avid photographer first, and I love to take pictures, so I totally understand that. He is the father of one daughter and a husband. And he has an interesting story I want him to tell about being a husband and meeting his wife.
Sure. Just a clarification, just so everybody knows that's Mullett with two T's. That's what differentiates me from the fish and the haircut. So it's very important to have that other T on there. So,
Okay.
But yeah, so
Yes.
my wife and I actually dated for 8 months when we were in the 5th grade.
That's fantastic.
And then I was dumb, and then we got back together again several years later in high school, and we dated for 6 years to the day when we got married.
Wow.
At the time that I would have been picking her up for our first date is when we actually got married, 6 years hence.
She's your first love.
She's my first love. Yeah.
That's fabulous.
Absolutely
That
fabulous.
really
She's
is
fabulous. I'm
Yeah.
mediocre at best.
Oh,
but
well,
she's fabulous.
I think the whole thing's fabulous. Yeah, very cool. Oh, thank you.
So I suppose one of the first aha moments that I can remember was just that my father had needed somebody to help out. And so one day he came up to the house and he got me and he says, I need you to push his rig with the bulldozer. And I was 8 years old.
Wow.
And,
Yeah.
you know, he needs to leave for work. The truck won't start. So he puts me behind the truck with this 8-ton piece of equipment. And he says, you're going to push me. So you've watched me run this before. Here's the levers. Do this. When I wave, you stop. Okay. All right.
Okay.
So I did that. And then as it progressed from there, I started helping him out on job sites running heavy equipment. So I've run trenchers, bulldozers, skid steers, or bobcats, depending on what you call them, cranes, and all this other kind of stuff.
Impressive.
So that first aha moment was that I can do these things. Like, you know, nobody my age that I knew was doing those type of things. So
8 years old.
So so I have the capacity to be able to do those things.
Which gives you confidence.
It's a huge confidence boost to know, you know, I mean, even today, if somebody says, hey, can you run whatever? I'm like, oh, yeah, I'll figure it out. It's no big deal.
Right.
And providing your children with that level of confidence is very important. Now the key, though, I think, is my dad didn't overinflate that confidence. He didn't, you know, it wasn't that I could accomplish everything. Like I wasn't, you could ask me mathematical equations and I know that I can't answer those.
Right.
But it's a confidence to know that if there's a piece of equipment, I can run it.
Yeah, they don't need to do that. I mean, it's an inside.
Yeah.
I bet he knew that by having you do that and by having you accomplish it, you would feel good about yourself.
That's a great distinction, because what my father knew really well is put me in positions to succeed.
Exactly.
And if you do that, then the confidence is built in such a manner that it is not the wrong type of confidence to have.
Exactly. It's not just an ego.
Correct.
Exactly.
Yes.
So then you moved on from that 8-year-old with this growing confidence to...
Well, the next thing that I would consider like this micro aha moment that's led to the career that I have now is, so we have this small town festival that we have.
Okay.
And my dad, since I can remember, was always the first one to start announcing when the fair opens, and he was always the last one to close the fair down. Now, they have other people that do announcing throughout the event because it's a 3-day event, but it was his job to go on and announce and tell people what's going on, and kind of an MC, but not really an official MC capacity. Well, when I was about 12 or 13 years old, I really can't remember, but when I was about 12 or 13 years old, my dad said, "Hey, you're going to help me with this," because that's what you did back then. Your parents said, "You're going to help with these community events."
Right.
No, you're not going to stay home and play games or whatever. You're coming down and you're going to help. So what he did was he would go on first, and then while he was still there in the headquarters tent, he would say, "Now you're going to do the next hour," and so he could coach me along. And so I would announce, and there's 5,000, 8,000 people on the grounds at a time.
Yes.
And because I was young, I really didn't think anything of it.
Right.
And I had fun with it. Right. And so then on the Saturday evening, he said, "You're going to go on an hour or 2 hours before me." I don't remember. And then I'll finish up. That progressed until my father actually lost his voice due to a chordoma tumor that he had. And so the gentleman that had been running the event for a number of years came up to me at a softball game down in that community, and he says, "I know your dad's struggling and can't speak anymore," and he says, "So you know what that means, right?" And my mind was not there.
Well, of course not. Of course not.
And he says, "Well, you're going to take over for your father. You are going to do this event." So that that sounds it's all touching and everything, and so I've been doing that for 30 years.
Wow.
Several years without my father. 13 years now.
Do you realize
But
how
the
amazing?
the moment there is that, again, that confidence that my father instilled upon me. My mom had a lot to do with this too, but it seems like some of these instances came by way of my father, and so I don't get nervous in front of crowds,
right?
And so that very much plays into what I do today.
Now. That is humongous. That is that's a very big aha.
That was a big moment because, but the thing of it is the 12-year-old didn't realize that.
No, of course
even
not.
even later in my life, it didn't really resonate until I was asked to do something that required that capability, that skill set. Being able to put that into practice.
That happens many times when someone has an aha moment. You don't really always know where it's leading.
Yeah.
But it takes you there if you follow it.
And then actually, my mom bought me a ticket to go to Zig Ziglar.
Oh, you're kidding. Ooh.
And so my mom was always really big into motivational speakers and so forth, and I bless her heart for that. So she introduced me to Zig Ziglar.
Awesome.
Now all of a sudden, we have a recognized ability
right.
That I can do.
The speaking, yes.
And now we have a potential application for that.
Yes, you do.
And so I was really who that has heard Zig Ziglar hasn't been taken back by him.
Yeah.
So at one point in time, I had it in my head that I would be a motivational speaker.
Did you?
And I'm just not sure I had the motivation to
be a motivational
speaker. But anyway, so that was something that my mom contributed to that.
Oh, but very cool. But and he was such a stageman too. I mean, he was very good.
He was wonderful,
If you
and
learn
his
method.
presence,
Yes.
his
As soon
delivery,
as he walked in. Yes.
his enunciation.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of qualities that I really looked up to from Zig Ziglar. I'm terribly
Learned
disappointed
from.
that he's passed.
I know. Wow.
Yeah.
So you're slowly getting into where you are now in your career.
Yeah, and then we
Step
take a
by
few
step.
divergent paths. Like, for example, when I was 16 years old, 15, 16 years old, I used to race BMX bicycles when I was a kid.
Did you?
And so one day I drew on a legal pad. I don't even remember why I was thinking of this, but I drew a set of handlebars that came down to a tight V and had a crossbar down at the bottom. Instead of what was common back in the day is the handlebars were curved and they were bent.
Yeah.
And the
I had
problem
one.
is when you come out of the starting gate on a BMX race, your knees would frequently hit those
Yes.
bars because there was no clearance.
Okay.
So I drew this, and I went to my teachers and I said, how do I build this? And they're like, it won't work, and
wow.
all of these other kind of things. A month later, and I'm not joking, a month after this, a BMX magazine came out,
Oh, you're kidding.
and these handlebars were in there by a company called Redline. Now, at the time, I was a smart enough kid to realize that means that they had to have been working on it for months prior to that. But this was the
Right.
first time that I seen it. That micro aha moment there was
Yes.
ideas that I have could be good enough
Have
to
value.
actually be put into production.
Yes. Very good.
And that the educators who are tasked to to provide education to me aren't actually there to teach me how to do real
Right.
life things like that.
No.
They're there to get me to pass tests and
Yes.
to teach me how to learn,
Right.
not
Right.
to do this.
Yes.
And so I became very frustrated with our educational system and decided, and this is pivotal,
Yes.
I was going to always decide to take my education, my learning on myself. I was going to have that be my responsibility, not where I would allow what they're teaching me to dictate their
see.
curriculum and their
I
initiative
see.
to direct what I would actually end up doing. So that was really
So that's excellent. Well, and you're a lifelong learner.
absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes. And that's very pivotal in that way.
And a lot of these events that I help run, I'm constantly telling people, not that I don't have leisure time or that I don't, take time to watch TV and so forth
Right,
like that. But I firmly believe that people should be devoting time every day to their betterment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of
do
came
too.
up with this. I should have wrote this down ahead of time because I kind of forgot about this. I came up with this thing that was 3, 5, and 50, if I remember correct.
3, 5, and 50. Okay.
And what that stands for is 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, for 50 weeks out of the year. Okay?
Yes.
If you devote 3 hours per day to professional development, because what differentiates you from every other person that comes out of a 12-year high school degree? What differentiates you from everybody that comes out with a bachelor's, a doctorate, or whatever?
Right.
Your own professional development. The
right.
part that you take part in is above and beyond. And so if you did 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, times 50, and I'm going to get the math wrong, but I think that's 750 hours of professional development time that your peers don't have.
That's right.
And that's been huge to me. And
It is huge.
And when I talk to people about that, they're like, well, there's no way I could do 3 hours a day. And I say, that's fine. Do one.
Do one.
1 by 5 by 50.
That's right.
Cut out the reading the newspaper. Cut out
That's right.
watching the TV. Cut
Yes.
out, do something that is for you.
I do that too.
Yeah.
I do my 3 hours. Yep. every day. So it's a lifelong learning, and it's a journey. I'm trying to get my kids to even do that. So it's an excellent.
I think it's just critical that people decide that they are not going to allow a preset curriculum to dictate their level of success.
That's right. And that's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
So now, I will lead, and I don't know if I'm leading ahead, so you tell me.
Mm-hmm.
But I would love to hear more of the story of the college, and since we're on the thing of education,
sure.
and the job, and where did that lead you? And
so the tough circumstance there is, from the time that I'm 16 and I first draw up that invention that actually doesn't, that somebody else had already developed, I had many, many more ideas and struggled. I even did my own patent search and everything.
Oh, wow.
But during that whole time, I drove down to Indianapolis. The old microfiche went in there to try and find out if this had been done. It hadn't been done. But through all of this, I'm going to the library, I'm reading.
Good for you.
But it's not really getting me to where I want to be. It's not really moving the needle. So because I had worked for my father, by the time I was 18, 19 years old, I had been doing heavy equipment operation for as long as some people do a career.
That's true.
And so I decided that I could decide whether I was going to go to college or I wasn't going to go to college. Mm-hmm. Now here's a micro aha dumb moment. I decided to take a car in lieu of going to college. So
a lot of boys would.
Yeah, and it was a really nice car. It was a Mustang GT, and So anyway, I did that. The repercussions of that later, despite my own personal, my education, my self-educating.
And innovation.
Innovation,
I mean, you were very innovative.
So I had worked for a company in town doing web development. They gave me my break because I had taught myself how to do Photoshop. I had taught myself how to do design. And because I had a sales and marketing background, which we'll circle back around to, I understood what the business objective of creating a website was about, not just how to make it pretty. Mm-hmm. So that company closes and I need to find a job. Well, now the repercussions of not taking the college thing comes into play, because although the first company had given me the chance, and by that time I had a portfolio. This is like 2000, year 2000.
Yeah. I
had about 80 websites that I had done by the year 2000. Okay. Wow. So a company, I won't say who the company was, but they were in Auburn, Indiana. They were hiring. And so I made this resume up, and it wasn't just a normal resume. I made this resume. I put black foam core cut a little bit larger than 8.5 by 11. I put a picture down on top of that. Then I had vellum, which is the see-through paper that had my resume printed on it.
Cool. Oh, wow.
I put a sugar packet and a ticket on that, and I vacuum sealed it.
You're kidding.
And I sent this to this advertising agency to try and get a web designer position.
That's very
Now,
cool.
I had read enough about resumes and so forth. You got to stand out. You got to be different.
Right.
Get it opened up.
That would caught my eye.
And then I also knew that I needed to do the follow-up. So a couple of days goes by.
Right.
And by the way, I had a link to my portfolio on there. A couple days go by, and I call them up, and I said, yes, my name is Kevin Mullett, and I recently sent a resume in regards to the position that you have available for your web designer position. I'm wondering if you had a chance to review that and if I might schedule a time to come in and have an interview with you.
Yes.
And I pitched it
That's good.
pretty much like that.
That's very nice.
And they said, "Oh yes, we remember. We remember your packet. It was very creative." And they said, "Now we noticed in there that you don't have a college degree."
Oh.
And I said, "Yes, that is correct. That is correct. I am completely self-taught, and I've learned this craft on my own because at the time there were no classes that were directly related to this anyway."
Yeah.
And they said, "Oh well, we're sorry. We don't employ anybody that doesn't have a 4-year degree." And I said, "Well, did you have a chance to review my portfolio? Because I see on your website that you've done a total of 10 websites, and I've done 80." And they're like, "Yes, we seen that you had that link, but no, we did not bother to do it because you do not meet the criteria that we have." And in my one, I'd like to believe this is my one transgression over the years, I said, "Well, thank you very much, because I absolutely, positively do not want to work for a company that is so short-sighted that they will reduce the worth of somebody to a piece of paper instead of their work."
I don't think that's so bad. And it's
Well,
very well said. It is.
I'm paraphrasing, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure.
'Cause I think it probably had a little bit more bite at the time.
It might have. It might have. But I don't blame you. That's really something.
Yeah.
That's
So that
great.
provided another micro aha moment to where, for at least the foreseeable future there, I would be a freelancer, because if that's,
Okay.
if that's the way that I'm going to be treated, despite my vigilant efforts to become
Right.
qualified at what I
Right.
do, and the success that I had with that, if I was going to be basically not even considered,
No, not even considered
then
because you don't have a degree.
that takes some wind out of your sail.
Oh, of course it does. And it is hard. It's very hard.
Yeah.
Especially when you're very good at what you do. So then you went into freelancing.
Yeah. And freelancing was fine. I'm a people person, so
Yes, you are.
the problem
Very much
is with freelancing is, you can wake up in the morning and you can stumble up to your computer and your skivvies,
Yeah.
and
That's true.
and that was before we had all of this connectivity that we have now. I mean, we were connected, but not to
like
the
now.
degree. I mean,
No.
I was in forums and I was, in chats and IRC and all of these other things, but it wasn't it didn't feel the same
Right.
as it does today. And so I decided I was going to go back to work, or attempt to go back, because I missed people. I missed the interaction. I
I'm
missed
like
the
that too.
collaboration.
Yes. I like people.
My dog was not very good at giving me feedback.
No.
And so I just,
No.
I really felt like I needed to
Get out.
get out.
Yeah, I totally understand that.
Yeah.
A little bit. Let's go back and talk about the other things that your dad taught you when, because your father taught you all this, gave you all this confidence. But what were some of the other things that helped you?
Well, I mean, growing up with a father that runs his own business, let alone a heavy equipment business where you get some toys to play with, I mean,
Toys,
well, that's the way we considered them, is we had toys. And so I was always very confident around, machinery and vehicles and so forth like that. And I got to, use blow torches and welding
wow.
equipment and
Yeah.
drills and saws and everything like that. So again, there's confidence that I think in this day and age we don't have. But there's something else that's really critically important that I think that we're sorely lacking today, and that is work ethic. And one of the things that I learned with my dad running his own business is there were times when we would wake up before the sun would come up, and we wouldn't come home until after that puppy was down.
Yeah.
And then during the winter, when it was slower, there were days that, we would go and goof off, and we'd go snowmobiling or something like that.
Sure.
But that whole concept of making hay while the sun is shining, it really resonates. That
Right.
you're gonna work until the job is done.
That's right.
And we don't have a lot of that. At least I
No.
don't see a lot of that these days. And
there's pockets.
There's pockets of it, sure. I don't want to pretend that it doesn't exist, but
No.
But I think that some kids do not have that work ethic, and I think that's terribly important for parents to instill. So when I worked, I had mentioned I worked for Kirby, and when I worked for Kirby, I worked on Saturdays half a day. I worked Monday through Friday, and we would run 3 appointments a day. And so there were a lot of times that I wouldn't get home until, very late at night.
Right.
Because you're, driving an hour and all over the place. And so that was just work.
It didn't bother
me. It
right.
was part of what had to be done.
Right.
And so now when I do these presentations, there are times that I'll be up until 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning, really working to refine my slide presentations, because I want it to be right, and that is more important than me being asleep.
Right.
And just kind of as a funny aside, there's a Sunday school teacher that I know still very well, and she was my Sunday school teacher when I was very young, and we fast forward to the age of when we have Facebook, and people have this thing where there's like, you don't ever sleep, and I'm like, well, no, that's ridiculous. I do sleep. I hate sleeping. I detest that part of my life is being wasted on something that I can't do anything with.
Right.
I feel like the age-old thing is I'll have plenty of time to rest when I'm 6 feet under. Okay.
Yep, that's
it infuriates me. If you can hear in my voice, it's getting elevated.
Yes, I hear it.
I detest sleeping. But anyway, so I was having this conversation with somebody on Facebook, and my old Sunday school teacher chimes in and she says, I remember even as a kid that you said that you hated sleeping.
Really?
And my mom actually chimed in just even a few days ago on a completely separate post. I mean, that other one was years ago, but this one the other day, and she says, as a kid, we had the hardest time getting you to sleep. You just hated to sleep.
Interesting.
And
Isn't that interesting?
I detest sleeping.
So, all right. And then you got in a job into computers, or did you get into a job of?
Well, I did some sales for a while, and actually, if we circle back to before the web work, I had done quite a bit in sales, and actually several of those offered me aha moments.
I can't believe sales would.
Yeah, one of the first ones. My grandfather was in sales. My dad was just a very personable individual, and so I could talk to anybody, and fairly persuasively if I desire to.
Yes.
And so I had taken a job for a company called National Revenue Corporation, and it was for collection services.
Oh, wow.
And so I was nervous about this just because I'd never done anything like this, but this is before the web work. And so they send you off to their corporate offices, and you're there with a bunch of other guys. And this very fascinating thing occurred. It was fascinating to me they handed us a script, and they said, go back to your hotel room, and we are going to call you, and you must read this script. And I'm looking at the paper, and I'm like, okay, all right. And the couple of gentlemen that were with me were like, who's going to go first? Who's going to go first? And I'm like, oh, I'll go first. That's fine, whatever. And so they call, and I do this. I look at the paper and I read the script and I give the feedback and used the appropriate voice inflections at the appropriate spots and so forth. And I get off the phone and I'm not thinking anything of this. And I look at the other guys and they're just like dumbfounded.
Really?
And freaking out because it was this big long script.
Oh, wow.
And they're like, had you seen this script before, or what's the story?
Wow.
And I'm like, no, why? And then I listened to them do it. And all of a sudden it occurred to me that all of these past micro aha moments, this both my mother and father being articulate and putting me into positions where I needed to be, provided my ability to be able to handle that situation with aplomb, where these other guys, for whatever reason, were not. And it made me feel like, again, here's an ability.
Yes.
Here is something that is not a normal, everybody doesn't do this, where I had thought that would just be a natural thing. Yeah. And so later on then, I after I became a freelancer and I decided I didn't really want to do that anymore, I actually, and this is going to sound really odd, but was one of the best experiences I had in my life and the worst at the same time. But I actually got into Kirby sales, the Kirby vacuum cleaner sales.
Oh, yeah, okay. Really? That's very hard, actually.
Now, when I went to this, just to make a very long story as short as possible, I told him, I said, look, I'm not here to sell vacuum cleaners. You guys mentioned that you have store ownership, but I respect the fact that you will not allow somebody to own a store unless they've actually sold the product. I respect that that is a criteria that you have. You should understand that.
Of course.
So I said, I will get to that point. And they said, well, you first have to hit this goal, and that normally takes 3 months to sell your first 12 units. And I said, I'll do it in 1. And I did. Good. And then they said, well, but then to get to this next phase, you got to do this in X amount of time. And I cut that in half.
Wow.
And along the way, I had made some ground rules. And I mean, it's very cocky of me to have done this, but I said, I am not going door to door. I understand you guys have a phone department. I will take appointments. Well, within the first couple of appointments that I went to, I realized these phone people are not being really forthright with the person on the other line. Okay. And I said, I can't in good conscience do this. So I would get to the place and I put my box down and I said, did they tell you how we are going to do this? And they said, yeah, they said you were going to clean my carpet. And I said, you know what? I am going to clean your carpet. But what I ask is, if you don't mind, if you watch me do it and you let me show you a couple of things while I'm here, then I get credit for showing you this. Is that fair enough? Now, this is a micro aha moment, because I realized that if I ask people and then they respond, then there's a mutual understanding. I don't have to be a bad guy about it.
No, not at all.
So I would show that to them. Of course I want to sell this to them, but I would show it to them. And then what I ended up doing is I went back to the phone gals and I rewrote their script. Now, you want to talk about cocky. I mean, this is a company that's been in business for 78 years. And I'm rewriting some of their scripts.
Yeah. Okay. But you knew what you were doing.
So I rewrote the script, and they had this thing they had a referral sheet, and they had a script for that too. Everything they had was a script. And which is fine. They were good people, and most of them. Yeah. And so I handed the phone gals my script, and I said, I want you to set my referrals based off of this, because I want them to understand what is happening. And they said, well, these won't set. And they were right for the first week or so. And then I changed the referral script, and I would say, Alena, do you know 10 people that I don't know that wouldn't mind having me, because I'm going to be the one doing it, into their home to do what I did for you today? Could you just write down 10 of them for me? I get credit for that. And I did. That's how they did it.
And they felt very comfortable.
They felt comfortable because I didn't push them.
With you.
Exactly. And I said, after they did that, I took it a step further. I said, would you mind calling those people just so that they don't feel like this is a bad deal? Could you tell them I'm not like an axe murderer or some wacko or whatever? Yeah. And I said, and tell them if they buy or they don't buy, I just have to have people to show it to. Okay. So they started doing that. Now, all of a sudden, those phone gals wanted my referrals
Sure they
because
did.
those would set. That in combination with my sales ability,
Yeah.
I held a 1 out of 2 closing ratio. So I knew that if I ran 10 leads in a week, I would probably
to do
sell
it.
5 of these things.
Very clever.
And
Very, very clever.
so anyway, so that was a huge, I'm sorry, that was a very long story, but that really was a pivotal time in my life where I was really trying to figure out that I don't have to play by other people's mandates.
Right. Yes.
I don't have to follow their script.
Exactly.
And I also have to accept adjustments when my direction doesn't work the way that I think that it should.
Exactly.
And I think that it more than at any other point in my life, that micro aha moment there was continue to try and be humble but bold.
Yes.
Because you don't want to be arrogant, but you
No.
also want to be confident. You want
Exactly.
to be assertive, but you want to be open to other people's
You want to
opinions.
stay open.
Yeah, you
That's
want to stay
exactly
open.
Right.
And I struggle like anybody
That's a
else with things,
fantastic-
but
That's
that
a
was
fantastic aha lesson, you know?
Yeah.
To
That was
learn
huge.
It
And
is huge.
I needed
It's
that
huge
at
for,
that point.
Well, a lot of people need that.
Right now, if you're
Yeah, right
listening,
now,
if you
yeah.
need that,
If you
take
need
that
there
advice.
it is. That's right, because it is. It's excellent. Always to stay open, but to have the confidence. Yes, very
Absolutely.
big. So then what got you into where you are now? It's the speaking and I mean, you're doing some awesome things.
Well, so just as a natural, some of it I would say is natural progression of web is you have to be stronger in marketing. So I would really have to kind of pull back into my sales thing and say, how does this web design work to actually provide that return to the business? Because it's not just a brochure. It needs to actually, elicit a response from
yes,
people.
it does.
And so what's the conversion and what's the paths to action? And all of a
Right,
sudden,
right.
all of these things that I learned from Zig Ziglar, all of these things that I learned from, I was
Yeah.
a ski bum for a while,
Were you?
for
I
6
just learned
months.
how to ski. That's fun.
And and so I did a little retail sales at that. So
Oh,
I picked
wow.
up a few things there.
Yeah.
I did the Kirby thing, and I did the national revenue, or the national, revenue, whatever, I can't even remember it now, corporation. And all of those little things, and I started implementing that into the broader marketing.
Very cool.
Along comes what is now coined as social media.
That's right.
Okay, and social media isn't new. It's certainly more pervasive, but new or popular and pervasive does not mean new. And so we were doing these same types of things back in the late 90s, early 2000s with websites. But now you have these new channels and these new platforms that make
lot
it
of them.
much easier.
Yes.
And there's a bigger audience
And-
because your common folk are actually getting onto that. I
Exactly.
call people
Lots of
common
them.
folk. But anyway,
Yeah. Well, everybody's on it now.
yeah.
Really.
And so, somewhere between everybody and nobody is. And if you talk to some CEOs, they're convinced nobody is on it, or at least nobody in their
Really?
market. And then you talk to people who are geeky, and they say everybody is on it. And
Well-
the reality is that it's more than nothing, and it's less than everybody. But
True.
it's certainly it's whether or not there's a big enough audience there for you. But anyway, I digress. The key is based on that 5 or that 3, 5, and 50. I decided I have to keep up with this. I have to know what's going on. And I have to keep up with online reputation management, search engine optimization, social media, analytics, the actual web, which I've had to let go of some of the back end part of web. I can't keep up with that as much anymore. and then design and what's currently happening in design. And then I unpack all of those things and try and look at that, which I'm not the only person doing this, but
No,
I try and
that's cool.
unpack those things and say,
Right.
all right, well, let's stop and think about this for a second. What is the benefit of this? And so
Okay.
it's led me to another aha moment for me, or micro aha moment, would be a gentleman that I was speaking for. Let me back up. So I decided I was going to really target some influencers. Okay.
Okay.
And one of the ways that I knew I could target those influencers to make myself known to them was by providing value to them
Of course.
and participating in their thing.
Yes.
And one of those individuals runs a Twitter chat. And so for a year, and this is commitment, for a solid year,
Yes.
I would show up every Monday night for social chat, and there were about 4 other ones. And every week I was spending 4 hours in the chats by themselves and then doing my other stuff.
Wow.
And this individual, Alan, I love you, man. This individual who was already in with the speaking groups,
Okay. Yes. Yes.
says, hey, they need somebody in Toronto to be on a panel to talk about Twitter chats. I can't think of anybody I'd rather have up there than you.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. Ideal.
So I drive up to Toronto to be on a panel. Now I'm not speaking really. I'm a panelist, but
Right.
and so I did my normal prep and thought outside the box, if you want to say that.
Sure.
And
Oh,
did
that's
some
good
cool
to
things,
know.
you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when I got there, Alan introduced me to the guy that runs it. And so I said to him, and by the way, I had been doing seminars and webinars for our company for years.
Okay.
It's way
that's
back
good
to
to
the
know.
2008 and so forth
Okay.
like that. So I was very comfortable with all of this whole scenario. So I walk up to him and, hi, how are you? We do the pleasantries and everything like that. And I said, hey, by the way, I noticed you guys don't have a check-in here on Foursquare. I said, do you have one? And he's like, I don't know. What do you do? And I'm like, oh, well, here, let me show you. And he says, well, can you set one up for us? And so I show him on the spot. Well, he's taken back by the fact that nobody else in the place had even asked him that.
Thinking outside the box. Yeah.
And so here I am.
Wow.
So I have this time with him because now he's interested in what I have to say.
Right.
And I said to him, I said, hey, by the way, this gentleman's name was Stuart. And I said, Stuart, I said, if you ever have a cancellation at one of these, I always have a slide deck prepared for search engine optimization and social media because I run some events myself. I know how that is when somebody backs out on you. I said, let me know, and I'd be happy to help you out.
Very smart.
Okay.
Yes.
So these events were run by a company called Media Bistro, and he asks me to be on a panel on a subject that I'm fairly familiar with, more than the average bear, but I'm not spot on with it.
Okay.
And I'm doing a gig at a college the night before that, before I fly out of Chicago.
All right.
At 2 a.m. in the morning, because I don't like to sleep. I hate sleeping, but that's
I'm
a
not
whole
surprised.
nother subject.
Yeah.
Anyway, so at 2 a.m. in the morning, I get an email from Stuart, and he says, you told me you were always ready? Tomorrow when you get here, you're on for a full presentation for 50 minutes.
Wow.
Don't let me down.
There you go.
Oh, man.
Wow.
So I stayed up, reworked a deck,
Yep.
worked on it on the flight out there or whatever, got up, and I go to do my presentation, which was a slight tweak from a presentation. Well, actually, it was a fairly substantial tweak, but anyway, and so I I'm doing this kind of unprepared, but it's my first thing, and I'm like, I've really got to bring it here.
Right.
I mean, I've got to sell this.
This
you know,
opportunity. Yeah.
There's 200 people in the audience,
Very nice.
And this is in San Francisco, my first really big conference.
Wow.
And so I get up there, and I become very animated and very, very
the adrenaline.
And which is how I tend to present anyway. And I'm pacing the stage. I'm not staying behind the lector. I'm all over the place and getting lots of laugh because I'm using self-deprecating humor and telling stories. And I get off the stage and I walk over to Stuart, and I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was something along the lines of, I thought you would be good, but I didn't know you would be that good.
Wow.
Pop.
Yes.
I flash back to Zig Ziglar.
Yeah.
I flash back to being in front of thousands of people at the fair. And I realized that all of this has been set in motion. And that's why I refuse to say I had one aha moment. I have micro aha moments that lead up to where I'm at today, including, a lot of failures that come along with that, which we tend not to talk about. But that was huge for me because it really it meant that I can convey a message to people that resonates with them, that also educates them, and that we can have fun while doing it. And then later, one of my favorite things, I've never told him this. I gotta call him and tell him this, but he sent me an email one time and he says, I would like for you to send me a quote because we need a new quote for this promotion we're doing.
Okay.
And he says, I'm asking you because you have this epigram-like wit and insight. And I had to go look up what the heck epigram. Now, I have a fairly extensive vocabulary, but not that extensive. And essentially what it means is it's a pithy saying or remark expressing expressing an idea in a clever or an amusing way. And I'm like,
easy to remember.
And easy to remember.
Exactly.
And so I'm like, so that's what I'm doing. I'm taking bigger concepts that are difficult for people to understand, and I'm pulling them down into a humorous, pithy, jokey, humorous kind of a way and delivering it in such a manner that they can absorb that. And so then what I found out is that I can take that same concept, which I had actually started doing in these Twitter chats that I was doing for a year, and find out that really, if you look at successful presenters and so forth, successful comedians, they look at what works and what gets feedback, and then they repeat it over and over and over again until the laughs stop. And so every time that I'm doing a presentation, I'm looking for that feedback, and I'm making a mental note. This worked, this didn't, that, whatever.
Yes.
And so I come up with things where I know I can go into a Twitter chat now, and if I drop something like social media is free to use, it's not free to do, and people are like, "Oh yes, that makes sense,"
that's good.
Or
that's good.
Social media works best when you're a willing participant that sees the value for yourself and for your company, and treats it like a lifestyle instead of a task.
Nice.
It compacts it down to this thing that people can actually digest and relate to. And then that led me to probably, because we're probably going to wrap this up, but that led me to one of these bigger moments where I made an acronym several years back. And it was me trying to convey to our clients and people how they should be treating social media. And I called it the help philosophy.
The help philosophy.
The help philosophy.
Okay.
And it stands for humanizing your message,
Ooh.
encouraging conversation, listening first, and promoting less.
Oh, I like that.
And
that's very nice.
Yeah. So people kind of dig that.
I dig that. Yeah, that's very cool. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Well, you don't just always, you because of the confidence that you were given as a child or gained as a child, you've been able to not only take an aha moment, the micro aha moments, but you also take advantage of every opportunity that comes too. Do you see? And that's what's led you. I mean, it's because you have the confidence to do that. You don't stand back. It's invaluable.
But what listeners should hear is I am fallible. I am human.
Of course.
And so there are things that that I've missed on.
Sure.
That I really wish I would have taken advantage of. But, at the end of the day, we're a sum of all of our experiences, not just the one. And if you can continue to grow upon those and you can learn from those, and you can continue to have micro aha moments that may lead. I'm ecstatic for people that have one big moment. That's great and very, clarifying for them. For me, it has been more of a progression.
I think for everyone, there's always that starting aha moment. That's kind of the big one. But then there are a ton of micro aha moments for everyone. I mean, even for me,
Sure.
I still have my aha moments that lead me on my way. And that's just the way it is. And as far as failures or things that we miss, if we learn from them, and they can be they're just as valuable as our wins, and sometimes more so.
Absolutely. I just learned another one the other day, and it led to another one of these epigram-like thoughts. The amount of knowledge that you have is irrelevant if you do not know how to apply it and to meet your obligations.
Yes.
I let somebody down the other day, a company, and it really bothered me. And I mean, I suppose that's good that it bothers me because it should not be a normal thing.
Right, it should not.
But I really, they don't question my knowledge. They don't question my ability. What they questioned was the timeliness in which I could apply either.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a very fair thing. And one of the things that my dad and my mom were both very good about as well, and I think is sorely missing in our society, is they did not allow me to make excuses.
Right.
I had the obligation. I dropped the ball.
That happens.
And it happens.
It does happen.
But coming up with excuses for it or blaming other, we had one of our guys was out with pneumonia and whatever like that. But I was still able to communicate back to that individual, I'm sorry, I take ownership for it.
Good.
It was on me, and I dropped the ball. And I'm sorry I put you in a position to even have to ask.
Very nice.
For this.
Right.
And, but yeah, so that's
that humility and caring about the other person. So important. And then you learn.
Hopefully we learn.
Well, that's the object. Oh, Kevin, I have so enjoyed this.
I have enjoyed it as well.
Yeah.
You let me speak, and I love to speak.
Well, yeah. Oh, I'm glad. Yeah, I love your stories, and just a wonderful journey you took us all on.
Well,
I
hopefully,
just appreciate it.
I hopefully the journey ends with people taking this, and if they do nothing else, because I like to end with action statements and whatever.
Let's hear it.
If you do nothing else, then I encourage people to take that 1 hour a day, 5 days a week. You get 2 off. 5 days a week. And 50 weeks out of the year to give you, that's 250 hours of professional development time that your peers won't be doing. And it's valuable to you.
Very valuable. That's excellent advice. Excellent. That continuing to learn.
You can't stop learning.
Important. You can't. You really can't.
You cannot stop learning.
No, I can't. I know. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And that is all for Aha Moments with Alena, and I thank everyone for joining us. And I say, yes, definitely do your 1 hour of professional and even add a half an hour for your own personal development. Thank you. You can learn more about me by visiting alenachapman.com or follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.